The gunshot that woke Vincent Mercer that cold November night in 1882 wasn't what made him grab his rifle and step onto the porch of his ranch house outside Eureka Springs, Arkansas. It was the silence that followed, thick and heavy as morning fog over the White River. He stood there in his undershirt and trousers, boots unlaced, breath misting in the frigid air, listening to the wind whistle through the bare oak trees that surrounded his property. Nothing moved in the darkness except the skeletal branches swaying overhead. He waited another full minute before lowering his weapon and turning back toward the door, convincing himself it had been a hunter taking a late shot at a deer. That's when he heard it. A soft, pained exhale from directly beneath his feet. Vincent froze, his hand tightening on the rifle stock. The sound came again, barely audible over the wind. Slowly, carefully, he moved to the edge of the porch and peered over the railing into the shadowed crawlspace below. At first he saw nothing but darkness and the lattice work that enclosed the area beneath the house. Then the clouds shifted, moonlight broke through, and he found himself staring at a pair of eyes reflecting back at him like a cornered animal. "Don't shoot," came a voice, hoarse and distinctly female. "Please don't shoot." Vincent's mind raced through possibilities. A runaway, an outlaw. He'd heard stories of women taking to the outlaw trail, though he'd never encountered one himself. "Come out where I can see you," he said, keeping his voice level and his rifle pointed at the ground rather than at her. His father had taught him never to aim at something he wasn't prepared to kill, and despite his wariness, shooting a woman hiding under his porch wasn't in his nature. "I can't," she said, and he heard genuine pain in her voice. "My leg. I think something's wrong with it." Vincent stood there for a long moment, weighing his options. Every instinct told him to be cautious. This could be a trap, a ruse to get him to lower his guard. But the temperature was dropping fast, probably down near freezing already, and anyone who'd spent the night under his porch in weather like this was either desperate or dying. "I'm coming down," he said finally. "And I'm armed. Don't try anything foolish." "My gun's on the ground next to me," she said. "I'm not reaching for it." Vincent descended the porch steps slowly, his eyes adjusting to the darkness beneath. He could make out her shape now, curled in the far corner where the lattice met the foundation. She was small, wrapped in a coat that had seen better days, her dark hair loose and tangled around her face. And there, catching the moonlight, was a revolver lying in the dirt about 2 feet from her outstretched hand. He picked up the gun first, tucking it into his waistband. Then he knelt down, getting a better look at her. She was young, maybe early 20s, with a face that might have been pretty if it wasn't so pale and drawn with pain. Her eyes were dark and watchful, following his every movement with the wariness of someone who'd learned not to trust easily. "Where are you hurt?" he asked. "My left leg. I fell coming down the ridge about a mile back, made it here before I couldn't walk anymore." "What were you running from?" She hesitated, and he saw the calculation in her eyes, deciding how much truth to tell him. "Men who wanted to hurt me," she said finally. "That's all you need to know." Vincent considered this. It wasn't much of an explanation, but the fear in her voice seemed genuine enough. "Can you stand if I help you? I don't know." He set his rifle down carefully, keeping it within reach, and moved closer. "I'm going to put my arm under your shoulders. Tell me if I'm hurting you." When she didn't object, he slid his arm behind her back and felt her stiffen at the contact. She was shaking, he realized, though whether from cold or fear or pain he couldn't tell. Probably all three. Together they managed to get her upright, but the moment she put weight on her left leg, she cried out and would have collapsed if he hadn't been supporting her. In the moonlight, he could see her ankle was swollen, pushing against the leather of her worn boot. "Come inside," he said, making the decision even as the words left his mouth. "It's warmer." We'll look at that leg properly." "I don't need your charity," she said through gritted teeth, but her body betrayed her words, leaning heavily against him. "It's not charity. It's common decency. Now you can accept my help and get warm, or you can freeze to death under my porch out of stubbornness. Your choice." For a moment he thought she might actually choose the latter. Then she gave a small nod, and he half carried her up the porch steps and through the front door into the warmth of his house. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers, but it was still considerably warmer than outside. He guided her to the leather chair near the fireplace and helped her sit, then moved to build up the fire. In the growing light, he got his first good look at her. She was indeed young, with sharp, intelligent features and eyes that held too much wariness for someone her age. Her clothes were men's clothes, trousers, and a shirt under the heavy coat, all of them dusty and travel-worn. Her right hand kept moving toward where her gun should have been before remembering he'd taken it. "My name's Vincent Mercer," he said, feeding wood to the fire. "I run this ranch alone." "There's no one else here if that's what you're worried about." "Olivia Greene," she said after a pause, "and I wasn't worried about that. What were you worried about then? Whether you were going to turn me over to whoever comes looking." Vincent straightened up, studying her in the firelight. Someone going to come looking, probably. They were pretty determined. "These men who were chasing you, what do they want?" Olivia's jaw tightened. "What most men want when they chase a woman. What do you think?" The blunt answer caught him off guard, but it explained a lot. "Well, they're not getting anything from me except maybe a bullet if they come onto my property with bad intentions." He moved to the kitchen area and filled a basin with water from the pump. "Let's get a look at that ankle." He knelt in front of her chair and reached for her boot, but she pulled her leg back. "I can do it myself. You can barely move without crying out. Let me help." Their eyes met, and he saw the internal struggle playing out behind hers. Trust didn't come easy to her, that much was clear. Finally, slowly, she extended her leg. Vincent worked the boot off as gently as he could, but she still sucked in a sharp breath when it came free. The ankle underneath was badly swollen, already showing dark bruises. "It's not broken," he said, probing carefully, "but it's a bad sprain. You won't be walking on this for at least a week, maybe 2. I can't stay here that long. You don't have much choice. Even if those men don't come looking, you'd be lucky to make it 100 yards on that ankle." He soaked a cloth in the cold water and wrapped it around the swelling. "You hungry?" The way her eyes lit up at the question told him she was starving. "I could eat," she said, trying to sound casual. Vincent moved to the kitchen and started pulling out supplies. Bread, cheese, some cold beef from dinner. Nothing fancy but substantial. As he prepared the food, he found himself glancing back at her. She sat very still in the chair, watching him with those dark, wary eyes like a wild creature that might bolt at any sudden movement. "How long since you ate?" he asked, bringing her a plate. 2 days. Maybe 3. She took the food with both hands, and despite her obvious hunger, she ate slowly, carefully, like someone who'd learned the hard way that eating too fast after going hungry made you sick. Vincent poured water into 2 cups and handed her one. "Where are you from?" "Olivia Greene." "Does it matter?" "Suppose not. But if men come looking for you on my property, I'd like to know what I'm getting into." She took a long drink of water before answering. "Little Rock originally. My father died 6 months ago, left me alone with debts I couldn't pay. The man who held the biggest debt decided he'd take payment another way." Her voice was flat, matter-of-fact, but Vincent heard the anger underneath. "I disagreed, strongly, with a fireplace poker. You kill him." "No, but I hurt him bad enough that he's going to want revenge. And he's got friends, men who work for him. They've been tracking me for 3 weeks now." Vincent absorbed this information. It painted a picture he didn't much like, but he'd seen enough of the world to know it was probably true. Arkansas in 1882 wasn't an easy place for a woman alone, especially one without family or money. "This man have a name. Why, you know everyone in Arkansas. I know the important people, the dangerous ones." Olivia studied him for a long moment. "Marcus Thornton. He runs a freight business out of Little Rock. And other things." Vincent knew the name. Thornton had a reputation and none of it good. He dealt in legitimate freight, but everyone knew his real money came from less legal enterprises. Protection rackets, smuggling, probably worse. A man like that wouldn't take kindly to being crossed, especially by a woman. "His men come here, they're not getting you," Vincent said. "That's a promise." "Why would you do that? You don't know me. Don't need to know you to know what's right." He settled into the chair across from her. "You can stay here until your ankle heals. Help around the house if you want to feel like you're earning your keep. When you're well enough to travel, I'll give you supplies and point you towards somewhere safe." "There's nowhere safe. Not from men like Thornton." "Then you'll stay here as long as you need. This is good land, and I've got enough for 2 people to live on comfortably." Olivia shook her head. "You're a fool if you think this ends well for you. Maybe. But I'm a fool with a warm house and food, which is more than you had an hour ago." He stood up, stretching. "There's a bedroom upstairs, first door on the right. You can sleep there. I'll take the couch down here. I'm not taking your bed. You're injured. You need a proper bed more than I do." When she looked like she might argue further, he held up a hand. "I'm not debating this. You can barely walk. You're sleeping in the bed." For a moment he thought she might refuse out of sheer stubbornness, but exhaustion and pain won out. She nodded slightly, and he helped her to her feet, supporting her weight as they made their way slowly up the stairs. The bedroom was simple but clean, with a large bed covered in quilts his mother had made before she died. He helped Olivia sit on the edge of the mattress. "Thank you," she said quietly, the words seeming to cost her something. "Get some rest. We'll figure out the rest in the morning." He left her there and returned downstairs, banking the fire and settling onto the couch with a blanket. Sleep was a long time coming. He kept thinking about the woman upstairs, about the fear and defiance he'd seen in her eyes, about the trouble that might be heading his way. Vincent Mercer had lived 31 years without looking for complications, running his small ranch peacefully, keeping to himself. Now, he'd invited danger right into his house. But when he closed his eyes, he kept seeing her face, pale and exhausted under his porch, and he knew he'd make the same choice again. Morning came cold and bright. Vincent woke to frost on the windows and built up the fire before starting breakfast. He was frying eggs and bacon when he heard movement upstairs, the slow, careful steps of someone trying not to put weight on an injured leg. By the time Olivia appeared at the top of the stairs, he'd set 2 plates on the table. "You should have called me," he said. "Those stairs aren't easy with a bad ankle. I can manage." But she was gripping the railing hard, her face tight with pain as she descended. He waited until she reached the bottom before offering his arm, which she took reluctantly. In the morning light, he could see her more clearly. She was probably 22 or 23, with a strong jaw and eyes that were more green than brown. Her dark hair fell past her shoulders, tangled from sleep. Even exhausted and injured, there was something striking about her, a fierce quality that reminded him of the wild horses that sometimes ran through the hills. They ate in silence for a while. Vincent wasn't much for small talk, and Olivia seemed content with the quiet. But as they finished eating, she looked around the house with more attention, taking in the simple but solid construction, the well-made furniture, the books on the shelf near the fireplace. "You built this place yourself?" she asked. "Most of it." "My father helped with the barn and the foundation before he passed." Been working this land for 8 years now. No wife. No. Why not? Vincent considered the question. Never found the right woman, I suppose, and I'm not easy company. I like the quiet, like being alone. Most women want more than that. Most women want security, Olivia said. A man who won't disappear or drink away the money or use his fists when he's angry. Quiet doesn't seem so bad compared to that. There was a story behind those words, Vincent thought, but he didn't push. Instead he said, "You should stay off that ankle today. Let it rest. There are books if you want to read, or you can just sleep more. I've got work to do in the barn and the south pasture. I can help. Not on that leg you can't. I can do things sitting down. Mending, maybe, or food preparation. I'm not going to just sit idle while you work." Vincent saw the pride in her eyes and recognized it. He'd feel the same way in her position. All right. There's mending that needs doing. Shirts and some torn blankets. The sewing basket is in the cabinet by the fireplace. He showed her where everything was, helped her settle back into the chair with her injured leg elevated, and then headed outside. The morning was crisp and clear, his breath fogging in the cold air. He had a dozen tasks that needed attention: fence posts to check, livestock to tend, firewood to split. Physical work that let his mind wander. He kept thinking about Olivia Greene, about the way she held herself, ready to fight or flee at any moment, about the intelligence in her eyes and the careful way she spoke, weighing every word. She was educated, he'd noticed that in her speech, not common for a woman from her circumstances. Her father must have valued learning. As he worked, he found himself watching the road that led to his property, looking for riders that might be coming. If Thornton's men were tracking her, they'd eventually find their way here. It was only a matter of time. The question was what he'd do when they arrived. Inside the house, Olivia sat with the mending in her lap, but her hands were still. She was looking around the room at this place that felt more solid and safe than anywhere she'd been in months. Vincent Mercer confused her. Men didn't help without wanting something in return. That had been her experience. But he'd taken her in, given her his bed, asked for nothing. Even now he was outside working, leaving her alone in his house with all his possessions. Either he was a fool or he was genuinely decent. She didn't trust decent. Decent was usually a mask men wore until they got what they wanted. But her ankle throbbed and she was warm and fed. And those were things she couldn't ignore. So she picked up the first shirt and started mending the tear in the sleeve, letting the familiar motion of needle and thread calm her racing thoughts. Vincent came in around midday, stamping snow off his boots. It had started flurrying while he worked, light dustings that probably wouldn't amount to much. He found Olivia still in the chair, a neat stack of mended items beside her. "You've been busy," he said, hanging his coat by the door. "I told you I wouldn't sit idle." She set aside the blanket she was working on. "There's stew in the pot. I heated it up." "You shouldn't be walking around." I hopped, and I used the table for support. My ankle's fine if I don't put weight on it. They ate the stew with fresh bread, and this time Olivia was the one who broke the silence. "Why do you live out here alone? Town's what, 5 miles away?" 7. "And I like the space, like being able to see the horizon." He paused. "My father was a cavalry officer during the war. After it ended, he wanted nothing to do with crowds or noise. Moved us out here when I was 15. I grew up in this quiet and I like it. Doesn't it get lonely? Sometimes. But lonely's better than being around the wrong people." Olivia nodded slowly, understanding that sentiment more than he probably realized. "What about friends? Family? Got a sister in Texas. We write sometimes. Friends in town, men I drink with occasionally, that's enough for me." He looked at her directly. "What about you? You got anyone you can go to once you're healed?" "No. My mother died when I was young. No siblings. My father's friends scattered after he died and the debts came calling. She said it matter-of-factly, but Vincent heard the loneliness underneath. Then you'll stay here until you figure out your next move. I meant what I said last night. You're welcome as long as you need. You keep saying that, but you don't understand what you're offering. Thornton won't stop. If his men find me here, they'll burn this place down around us. Let them try. Vincent's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. I fought in range wars, defended this land against claim jumpers and thieves. I'm not afraid of city men playing at being tough. These aren't men playing. Thornton employs killers. So did the cattle barons. I'm still here. They're not. Olivia studied him across the table, seeing him properly for the first time. He was tall, probably over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, hard build of someone who worked with his hands every day. His face was weathered from years in the sun, with deep-set eyes that were a striking light blue. His brown hair was getting long, curling slightly at his collar. Not handsome in a conventional way, but strong-featured and capable-looking. The kind of man who knew his own strength and didn't need to prove it. You're either very brave or very stupid, she said. Probably some of both. He stood and started clearing the dishes. Get some rest this afternoon. That ankle needs time to heal. The days fell into a rhythm. Vincent worked outside, tending his cattle and horses, repairing equipment, doing the 100 tasks that running a ranch required. Olivia stayed inside, resting her ankle and making herself useful however she could. She mended clothes, organized his chaotic kitchen, cooked meals that were considerably better than his usual fare. Slowly, carefully, the wariness between them began to ease. On the 3rd day, Vincent came in to find her standing at the stove without support, testing her weight on the injured ankle. She still favored it heavily, but she could bear weight for short periods now. Healing fast, he observed. I heal fast from everything, always have. She stirred the pot on the stove. I made soup, real soup, not just heating up what you already had. Vincent tried it and couldn't hide his surprise. This is good, really good. My father taught me. He said a person who could cook would never starve. Her expression softened slightly at the memory. He taught me a lot of things. Reading, writing, arithmetic, how to shoot. How to think for myself. He said the world wasn't kind to women, so I needed to be smarter and stronger than anyone expected. Sounds like a good man. He was. He just wasn't good with money, made bad investments, trusted the wrong people. She ladled soup into bowls, including Marcus Thornton. They ate dinner as the sun set outside, the room growing dark except for the firelight. Vincent lit lamps, and they talked more than they had before, Olivia telling him about growing up in Little Rock, about her father's work as a schoolteacher, about the books they'd read together. Vincent shared stories about the ranch, about his years in the range wars, carefully editing out the worst parts. You ever kill anyone? Olivia asked suddenly. The question hung in the air between them. Vincent considered lying, but she deserved honesty. Yes. How many? I don't know. 7, maybe 8. It was war, more or less. Men trying to drive us off our land, us fighting back. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not ashamed either. I did what I had to do to survive. Olivia nodded, accepting this. I think I could kill Marcus Thornton if I had the chance. Does that make me evil? It makes you human. Man hurt you, threatened you, forced you to run. Wanting him dead for that is natural. He met her eyes across the table. But actually doing it would change you. Some changes you can't undo. Maybe I'm already changed. Maybe running and hiding and being afraid has already made me into someone else. Fear doesn't change who you are. It just shows you what you're capable of. They sat in comfortable silence after that, and Vincent realized he liked having her here. Liked coming in from work to find the house warm and food cooking. Liked having someone to talk to in the evenings. Liked the sound of another person moving around, the evidence that he wasn't alone. That thought should have worried him. He'd been content with solitude for years. But somehow Olivia's presence didn't feel like an intrusion. It felt right, natural, like she'd always been meant to be here. On the 6th day, riders came. Vincent was in the barn when he heard the horses. 3 of them, moving up the road at an easy pace. He grabbed his rifle and stepped outside, positioning himself where he had clear sight lines to the approaching men. They were still 100 yards out when he recognized the type. Hired guns, men who wore their weapons like they wanted everyone to see them. City toughs trying to look dangerous. The leader was a big man with a thick beard and a scar running down his left cheek. He raised a hand in greeting as they rode up, but Vincent didn't lower his rifle. "Help you gentlemen with something," he called out. "Looking for someone," the bearded man said, keeping his horse at a respectful distance. "Young woman, dark hair, traveling alone, might have come through here a few days back. Lot of young women in Arkansas, going to need more detail than that. This one's particular. Name's Olivia Greene. She's wanted for assault back in Little Rock. Man named Marcus Thornton has posted a reward for information leading to her whereabouts." "Assault, huh? What'd she do?" "Attacked Mr. Thornton with a fire poker. Left him with a broken arm and a cracked skull. Woman's dangerous." The man leaned forward in his saddle. "You seen her or not?" Vincent made a show of thinking about it. "Can't say I have. Been working my land, not watching the roads. She on foot or horseback? Foot, probably. She ran 3 weeks ago, been tracking her since. Trail led this direction." "Well, good luck to you. Hope you find her, but I haven't seen any strange women around my property." Vincent's voice was calm, casual, but his finger rested near the trigger of his rifle. The bearded man studied him for a long moment, his eyes narrowing. Then he looked past Vincent toward the house. "Nice place you got here. Must get lonely living all alone. I like the solitude. Makes it real easy to notice when people show up uninvited." The threat was subtle but clear. The bearded man's jaw tightened, but he nodded slowly. "We'll be on our way then. But we'll be asking around Eureka Springs, showing her picture. If anyone's seen her, we'll know. You do that. Have a good day, gentlemen." The 3 men turned their horses and rode back down the road. Vincent watched until they disappeared from sight, then quickly walked back to the house. Olivia was standing just inside the door, her revolver in her hand, her face pale. "They'll be back," she said. "They know I'm here. I could see it in that man's eyes. Maybe. But they can't prove anything, and they know I'm armed and ready." He took the gun gently from her hand. "Olivia, listen to me. I'm not turning you over to them. Not now, not ever. You understand? You'll get yourself killed for a woman you barely know. I know you well enough. And I keep my word. I said you were safe here, and I meant it." She looked at him for a long moment, and something shifted in her expression. The wall she'd kept up between them cracked just slightly. "Why are you doing this? Really?" Vincent considered the question. The honest answer was complicated, tangled up with things he barely understood himself. He liked her, admired her strength, felt protective of her in a way that went beyond simple decency. But that wasn't the kind of thing a man could just say outright. "Because it's right," he said finally. "And because you deserve better than being hunted like an animal. That's not a good enough reason to risk your life. It's good enough for me." That night Vincent slept with his rifle beside the couch and his boots on. He woke twice to sounds outside, but both times it was just the wind or animals. Still, he knew the bearded man had been right about one thing. Thornton's men would ask around town, and someone would remember seeing tracks or smoke from his chimney. They'd put it together eventually. In the morning he found Olivia already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. She'd made a pot, strong and black. Vincent poured himself a cup and sat across from her. "I should leave," she said without preamble. "Head west, lose myself in Indian Territory or Colorado. Somewhere they won't follow. Your ankle's not healed enough for that kind of travel. It'll have to be. I won't put you in more danger." "Olivia, look at me." He waited until her eyes met his. "I'm not some innocent bystander you're putting at risk. I'm a grown man who's made his choice. Those men come back, I'll handle it. But I'm not sending you out into the wilderness with a bad ankle and winter coming on. That's not up for discussion. You're stubborn. So are you. Guess we have that in common." Despite the tension, Olivia almost smiled at that. "Your coffee's terrible, by the way. I know, but it's strong and it's hot. That's all I need. I'll make it properly from now on." "From now on, thought you were leaving." She looked down at her cup. "I should, but I don't want to." The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Vincent felt something tighten in his chest, an emotion he couldn't quite name. "Then stay," he said quietly. "Stay as long as you want." The days that followed were tense. Vincent kept his rifle close and watched the road constantly. But no riders appeared, and slowly the immediate threat seemed to ease. Olivia's ankle continued to heal, and she began moving around more, helping with outdoor tasks, feeding the chickens, drawing water from the well. They fell into an easy partnership, working side by side, talking more freely. Vincent learned that Olivia had wanted to be a teacher like her father, that she loved to read, that she had a sharp wit and a quick laugh when she let her guard down. She learned that Vincent had a dry sense of humor, that he was patient and thoughtful, that he moved through the world with a quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly who he was. One evening, 2 weeks after she'd arrived, they were sitting by the fire after dinner when Olivia said, "Tell me about the range wars. What was it really like?" Vincent stared into the flames, remembering things he usually tried to forget. "It was ugly. Big cattlemen trying to drive out the small ranchers, claiming the land was theirs by right. They'd burn homesteads, kill livestock, sometimes kill people. We organized, fought back. Lot of men died on both sides before it ended. Were you scared?" "Terrified most of the time, but I was angry too. My father had died to secure this land. I wasn't giving it up without a fight." He turned to look at her. "Why do you want to know?" "Because I'm trying to understand you, trying to figure out what kind of man risks everything for a stranger. Maybe I'm not doing it for a stranger anymore." The words were out before Vincent could stop them. Olivia's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The fire crackled in the silence, shadows dancing on the walls. "Vincent," she said softly, and hearing his name on her lips made something twist inside him. "You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're brave and smart and stronger than you give yourself credit for. I know you make me want to be a better man." He hesitated, then pushed forward. "I know that when you smile, really smile, it lights up this whole house. And I know that the thought of you leaving makes me feel empty in a way I haven't felt in years." Olivia stood up abruptly, and Vincent thought he'd said too much, pushed too hard. But she didn't walk away. Instead, she moved to stand in front of him, close enough that he could smell the soap she'd used that morning, see the gold flecks in her green eyes. "I'm trouble, Vincent. Trouble follows me. You let yourself care about me and you'll regret it. Let me worry about that. I've never known anyone like you, never known a man who kept his word just because it was right, who asked for nothing in return." She reached out slowly, tentatively, and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I don't know what to do with that. With you." Vincent covered her hand with his own, holding it against his cheek. "You don't have to do anything. Just stay. Give this a chance. Give us a chance." What if Thornton's men come back? What if they burn this place down? Then we'll rebuild together. You're crazy, probably. But I'm crazy about you, so I suppose it fits. This time when she smiled, it was the real thing, full and bright, and Vincent felt his heart turn over in his chest. Then she leaned down and kissed him, soft and tentative at first, then deeper as he pulled her into his lap, his arms wrapping around her waist. She tasted like coffee and something sweet, and Vincent felt like he was falling and flying at the same time. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Olivia rested her forehead against his. "This is a terrible idea," she whispered. "Best terrible idea I've ever had," Vincent murmured back and kissed her again. They sat there by the fire for hours, talking and kissing and learning the shape of each other, the way two people do when they're discovering something precious and new. Vincent told her things he'd never told anyone, about his fears and dreams, about the loneliness that had haunted him for years. Olivia shared her own secrets, her own pain, letting down the walls she'd built to protect herself. When they finally went upstairs, Vincent started to head for the couch, but Olivia caught his hand. "Stay with me," she said. "Just to sleep. I don't want to be alone tonight." So Vincent climbed into bed beside her, fully clothed, and held her close as she drifted off to sleep. He lay awake for a long time, listening to her breathe, feeling the warmth of her body against his, and thought that this might be what happiness felt like. He'd been alone for so long he'd almost forgotten. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Vincent woke to find Olivia already up, standing at the window and looking out at the frost-covered landscape. She turned when she heard him move, and her smile made the room feel warmer. "Good morning," she said. "Morning. How's the ankle?" "Much better. I think I could walk to town now if I needed to." "Let's hope you don't need to." Vincent got up and moved to stand beside her at the window. Outside, his small ranch stretched out in the pale morning light, peaceful and quiet. "What are you thinking about?" "About how different this is from where I thought I'd be. A month ago I was running, scared, sleeping rough and going hungry. Now I'm here with you and it feels impossible. Like a dream I'm going to wake up from. It's real, I'm real." He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Olivia squeezed his hand, then turned to face him fully. "I think I'm falling in love with you, Vincent Mercer, and it terrifies me." Vincent felt his breath catch. Love. The word hung between them, huge and fragile at the same time. "I've already fallen," he said. "Been falling since I found you under my porch, stubborn and scared and too proud to ask for help. I just didn't want to scare you off by saying it. I'm not scared, not of this, not of you." She reached up and cupped his face in her hands. "I'm scared of losing it, of losing you." "You won't. I'm not going anywhere." They kissed then, slow and deep, and Vincent felt like he was making a promise with every touch, every breath. When they broke apart, he kept his arms around her, holding her close. "We should go into town today," he said. "Get supplies, show our faces. If Thornton's men are asking around, better they see us acting normal than hiding out here like we've got something to hide." "Is that safe?" "Safer than looking guilty. Besides, you need proper boots. Those ones you're wearing are falling apart." So they hitched up Vincent's wagon and made the 7-mile trip into Eureka Springs. The town was small but growing, built around the natural springs that gave it its name. Vincent knew most of the people there by sight if not by name, and he introduced Olivia as a friend who was staying with him for a while. If anyone thought it strange that he suddenly had a female house guest, they were too polite to say so directly. They stopped at the general store first, where Vincent bought supplies and Olivia picked out a new pair of boots, sturdy leather ones that would hold up to work and weather. The store owner, an older man named Charlie, gave Olivia a curious look but said nothing. As they were leaving, 3 men entered, and Vincent recognized one of them immediately. The bearded man from before, Thornton's hired gun. The man's eyes swept over them, taking in Olivia standing beside Vincent, her hand on his arm. Recognition flashed in his face, but Vincent met his gaze steadily, his own expression calm and unconcerned. After a long moment, the bearded man nodded slightly and moved past them into the store. Outside, Olivia was shaking. He saw me. He knows. He suspected before. Now he knows for certain. But knowing and doing something about it are two different things. Vincent helped her up into the wagon. He also knows I'm not hiding you, that I'm claiming you openly. That changes the situation. How? Because now if he comes for you, he's not just taking a runaway woman. He's starting a fight with a property owner, a man with standing in the community. That's a different risk, especially this far from Little Rock and Thornton's influence. They drove back to the ranch in silence, both processing what had happened. Vincent's mind was working through scenarios, preparing for what might come. When they pulled up to the house, he helped Olivia down from the wagon and held her for a moment. "I need you to trust me," he said, "and I need you to learn to shoot better. That revolver you had, you know how to use it properly. I can hit a target at close range. That's not good enough. Starting tomorrow, we practice. I want you comfortable with that gun, accurate with it. If trouble comes, you need to be able to defend yourself." For the next week, they practiced every afternoon. Vincent set up targets behind the barn and taught Olivia how to aim properly, how to breathe, how to squeeze the trigger instead of pulling it. She was a quick learner, and her hands were steady. By the end of the week, she could hit a man-sized target reliably at 20 paces. "You're good," Vincent said, watching her put 3 shots in tight grouping. "Natural talent. My father taught me the basics. You're just polishing the skill." She reloaded the cylinder with practiced ease. "Do you really think they'll come for me? I think they'll try. But we'll be ready." That night, as they lay in bed together, they'd stopped pretending they were sleeping separately. After the third night, Olivia traced patterns on Vincent's chest with her finger. "What happens after?" she asked quietly. "After what? After this is resolved one way or another, assuming we both survive. What then?" Vincent caught her hand and brought it to his lips. "Then we build a life. Together, if that's what you want. Get married, work this ranch, maybe have children someday if we're so blessed. Grow old watching the sunset from that porch." He paused. "That is what you want, isn't it?" "Yes," Olivia said, and her voice was thick with emotion. "Yes, that's exactly what I want. I just never thought I'd be allowed to have it. You're allowed, more than allowed. Olivia Greene, I'm asking you to be my wife. No ring yet, no fancy proposal, just a man in love asking a woman to share his life. What do you say?" Olivia's eyes were shining with tears in the darkness. "I say yes. 1,000 times yes." They made love then, for the first time, slow and tender and full of promises. Afterward, holding each other close, Vincent felt a peace settle over him that he'd never known before. He'd found something worth fighting for, worth dying for if it came to that. He just hoped it wouldn't. 2 days later, Thornton's men returned. There were 6 of them this time, including the bearded man. They rode up in the late afternoon when the sun was low and shadows were long. Vincent saw them coming and quickly ushered Olivia into the house. "Stay inside. Keep your gun ready. If things go bad, there's a root cellar behind the kitchen. Hide there and don't come out until I call for you or until you're certain they're gone. I'm not hiding while you fight alone. Yes, you are, because I need to know you're safe to do what I might have to do. Please, Olivia, trust me." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded and kissed him hard. "Don't you dare die on me, Vincent Mercer. Wouldn't dream of it." Vincent stepped out onto the porch with his rifle in hand. The 6 riders stopped a respectful distance away, but he could see they were armed and ready. The bearded man spoke first. "Mr. Mercer, we meet again." "So we do. What can I do for you gentlemen? You know what we want, the woman. Olivia Greene, we know she's here, saw you with her in town. And Mr. Thornton wants her returned to Little Rock to face justice for what she did." "Justice," Vincent said flatly. "That's what you're calling it. What she did was assault. Serious assault. Man has a right to see that answered. Man has a right not to force himself on women who don't want his attention. Seems to me Olivia Greene was defending herself. No crime in that." The bearded man's expression hardened. "You're harboring a fugitive. That makes you complicit. Hand her over and we'll leave you in peace." "Refuse and things will get difficult." "I'm not handing over anyone. Olivia is under my protection. She's going to be my wife, and if you want to get to her, you'll have to go through me first." One of the other men, younger than the rest, laughed harshly. "You and what army rancher?" "There's 6 of us and 1 of you." Vincent's expression didn't change. "I only need to be one, and you'd be surprised what one man can do when he's defending his home and his woman. Ask the cattle barons who tried to run me off this land. Oh wait, you can't. They're dead." The tension ratcheted up another notch. Hands moved toward guns. Vincent kept his rifle pointed at the ground, but his body was coiled, ready to move. He'd fought before, killed before. If it came to it, he'd do it again. The bearded man held up a hand, stopping his companions from drawing. He was smarter than the others, Vincent saw. He understood that starting a gunfight here now would be messy and expensive in lives. Thornton might want Olivia back, but probably not at the cost of half his hired guns. "You're making a mistake," the bearded man said. "Mr. Thornton is a powerful man. He has reach. He can make your life very difficult. Let him try. But I'm not giving up Olivia, not today, not ever. You want to report that back to your employer, feel free. Tell him she's spoken for. Tell him if he wants trouble, he knows where to find me." The standoff lasted another minute, both sides taking each other's measure. Then the bearded man nodded slowly and turned his horse. "This isn't over. Maybe not, but it is for today." The 6 men rode off, and Vincent stood on the porch until they were out of sight. Only then did he lower his rifle, his hands shaking slightly with adrenaline. Olivia burst out of the house and threw her arms around him. "You stood them down. 6 armed men, and you stood them down. They weren't ready to die today. That's all. But they'll be back, or they'll send word to Thornton and he'll come himself. This has escalated now. Then we run. Head west, lose ourselves in Colorado or California." Vincent held her at arm's length, looking into her eyes. "Is that what you want, to spend the rest of your life running?" "I want you alive. I want the same thing, but I also want to live without fear, without looking over my shoulder. We end this now, or we'll never be free of it." He pulled her close again. "I'm going to send a letter to the territorial marshal, explain the situation, get the law involved. If Thornton wants to pursue this, he'll have to do it legally, and that changes everything. You think the law will help. I think the law is better than vigilante justice. And I think once it's clear that you're my fiancé, that you have someone backing your story about what Thornton tried to do, things will look different." They spent the evening composing a letter to the marshal in Fort Smith, laying out Olivia's story in clear, simple terms. Vincent rode into town the next morning to post it, and while he was there, he stopped at the church and spoke with the pastor, a middle-aged man named Reverend Thomas. "I'd like you to marry us," Vincent said. "Soon, within the week if possible." Reverend Thomas raised his eyebrows. "That's quick. You've known this young woman how long?" "Long enough to know she's the person I want to spend my life with, and there are circumstances that make a quick marriage advisable." Vincent explained the situation, watching the Reverend's face carefully. When he finished, Reverend Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, That's quite a story, and you're certain about this woman, certain enough to make enemies of dangerous men, more certain than I've ever been about anything. All right then. 4 days from now, Saturday. Come to the church at 10 in the morning. Bring witnesses if you have them. Vincent shook the Reverend's hand. Thank you. When he returned to the ranch, Olivia was working in the garden, pulling up the last of the autumn vegetables before the hard frost came. She looked up at his approach, hope and worry mingled on her face. Well, we're getting married Saturday, 10 in the morning at the church in Eureka Springs. Olivia's hand flew to her mouth. Really? That fast? That fast? Once you're my wife legally, it's much harder for Thornton to claim you owe him anything. And if the marshal investigates, having you married to a respected landowner makes your story more credible. He pulled her to her feet and into his arms. Plus, I don't want to wait. I've waited long enough for you. She kissed him then, right there in the garden with dirt on her hands and her hair coming loose from its braid. I don't have a proper dress. Wear what you've got. I don't care about the dress. I care about you. Your friends will talk. Let them. I'm not ashamed of you or of marrying you quickly. Anyone who has a problem with it can take it up with me directly. The next 4 days passed in a blur of preparation. Olivia cleaned the house from top to bottom, wanting it to be perfect for when they returned as a married couple. Vincent rode to his nearest neighbor, a widower named Sam who he occasionally worked with, and asked him to stand as witness. Sam agreed readily, though he raised his eyebrows at the speed of the wedding. She must be something special, Sam said. She is. On Friday evening, Vincent gave Olivia a small box. Inside was a simple gold ring, plain and unadorned. It was my mother's, he said. My father gave it to me before he died, told me to give it to the woman I loved. I'd be honored if you'd wear it. Olivia's eyes filled with tears as she slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. I'll treasure it always, she whispered. Saturday morning dawned bright and cold. They dressed in their best clothes, Vincent in a clean shirt and his good jacket. Olivia in a simple blue dress she'd bought in town, and made the drive to Eureka Springs. The church was small and plain, with wooden pews and simple windows. Reverend Thomas was waiting, along with Sam and his wife, who had come to serve as the second witness. The ceremony was brief and simple. Vincent spoke his vows in a clear, steady voice, promising to love and protect Olivia for all his days. Olivia's voice shook as she made her own promises, but her eyes were bright with joy. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed her deeply, not caring that they had an audience. They signed the marriage certificate, making it official, and then the small group walked to the town's only restaurant for a celebratory meal. It was nothing fancy, just stew and bread and coffee, but Olivia glowed with happiness, and Vincent couldn't stop smiling. As they were finishing the meal, the door opened and the bearded man walked in. The mood shifted instantly. Vincent's hand moved to the gun at his hip, and Olivia went pale. But the bearded man held up his hands in a peaceful gesture and approached their table slowly. "Congratulations," he said, and there was no mockery in his voice. "I heard you got married today." "We did," Vincent said warily. "What do you want?" to deliver a message. "I sent word to Mr. Thornton about the situation here, about you claiming Miss Greene as your fiancée and now your wife. He sent a telegram back yesterday." The man pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to Vincent. "Said to give you this and then leave you alone." Vincent unfolded the telegram and read it quickly. His expression hardened, then shifted to something like grim satisfaction. He passed it to Olivia, who read it and let out a long, shaky breath. The telegram was brief. "Claim released. Not worth the trouble. Good luck to you both." "He's letting me go," Olivia said, disbelief clear in her voice. Seems like it. Guess standing up to him made an impression. Or maybe he just decided pursuing a married woman with a husband willing to fight wasn't worth the cost. The bearded man tipped his hat. Either way, my job's done. We're heading back to Little Rock. You won't see us again. He turned and left before Vincent could respond. The four of them sat in stunned silence for a moment. Then Sam's wife started to laugh, a joyful sound that broke the tension. "Well, I'll be," she said. "Looks like you're free, honey, really free." Olivia looked at Vincent, tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. "It's over." "It's really over. It's over," Vincent agreed, pulling her into his arms. "We're safe. We're married. We can start our life together without looking over our shoulders." They finished their meal in a considerably lighter mood, then said their goodbyes to Sam and his wife. The drive back to the ranch felt different somehow, charged with possibility and hope. This was their home now, truly theirs, without the shadow of threat hanging over them. That night they celebrated their marriage properly, making love with a freedom and joy they hadn't allowed themselves before. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Olivia said, "I still can't believe it's real, that he just gave up. You're not worth the risk to him anymore. Once you married me, you became part of a different world. Not a lone woman he could intimidate, but a rancher's wife with legal standing and a husband who'd fight for her. Men like Thornton are bullies. They only push when they think they can win easily." "Thank you," Olivia said softly, "for everything. For taking me in, for protecting me, for loving me. You saved my life in every way that matters. You saved mine too. I just didn't know I needed saving until I found you." Vincent kissed her forehead. "Now get some sleep, Mrs. Mercer. We've got a life to build." The winter that followed was harsh but happy. Vincent taught Olivia how to manage the ranch, how to handle the cattle and horses, how to read the weather and the land. She proved to be a quick study and a hard worker, never complaining about the cold or the labor. Together they were more efficient than Vincent had ever been alone, and the ranch prospered under their combined efforts. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, reading or talking or simply being close to each other. Vincent taught Olivia to play chess, and she beat him more often than not, which made him laugh. They made plans for the spring, for expanding the herd, for planting a larger garden, for all the mundane and beautiful things that made up a shared life. In February, Olivia realized she was pregnant. She waited a week to be certain before telling Vincent, afraid of his reaction. They'd never talked about children directly, had only mentioned the possibility in passing. But when she finally gathered the courage to tell him, his face lit up with such pure joy that all her fears vanished. "A baby," he said, pulling her into his arms. "We're going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Happy doesn't begin to cover it. I'm overjoyed, overwhelmed, terrified, all of it at once. He pulled back to look at her. "How are you feeling? Are you all right? Do you need anything?" Olivia laughed at his sudden concern. "I'm fine. A little tired, a little queasy in the mornings, but fine. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, Vincent. I'll manage." But Vincent was determined to take care of her. He insisted she rest more, took over the heavier chores, fretted whenever she looked pale or tired. It was endearing and occasionally annoying, but Olivia loved him all the more for it. The baby was born in October, a healthy boy with Vincent's blue eyes and Olivia's dark hair. They named him Thomas, after Olivia's father, and he was perfect in every way that mattered. Vincent held his son for the first time with tears running down his face, and Olivia knew in that moment that their family was complete. The years that followed were good ones. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic child who loved the ranch and the animals. Olivia gave birth to 2 more children, a daughter named Sarah and another son named James. The ranch expanded as Vincent bought neighboring land from families moving further west. They built a larger house, with enough room for their growing family and the future they were creating together. In the evenings, when the children were asleep and the work was done, Vincent and Olivia would sit on the porch he'd first found her sleeping under all those years ago. They'd hold hands and watch the sunset paint the Arkansas sky in shades of orange and gold, and neither of them would speak, because words weren't necessary. Everything they needed to say was in the life they'd built together, in the love that had grown from fear and desperation into something solid and enduring. Sometimes, Vincent would think back to that cold November night when he'd heard a noise under his porch and found a terrified woman with a gun. He'd made a choice then to help rather than turn away, and that choice had changed everything. It had brought him Olivia, had given him a family, had transformed his lonely existence into a life rich with love and purpose. "What are you thinking about?" Olivia would ask, noticing the faraway look in his eyes. "How lucky I am," he'd always answer. "How grateful I am that you chose to hide under my porch instead of somewhere else. I didn't choose it. I just collapsed there." "Well, I'm grateful anyway." And Olivia would lean against him, fitting perfectly into the curve of his arm as she always had, and they'd sit there together until the stars came out. Two people who'd found each other against all odds and held on tight. As the children grew older, Thomas showed an interest in ranching, following his father everywhere and learning the trade. Sarah proved to have her mother's head for numbers and started keeping the ranch books when she was just 12. James was the dreamer, always reading, always asking questions about the world beyond Arkansas. They were good kids, well-loved and well-raised, and Vincent and Olivia were proud of all of them. When Thomas turned 16, Vincent took him aside and told him the story of how he'd met Olivia, the full story with all its danger and fear and ultimate triumph. He wanted his son to understand that love sometimes meant taking risks, standing up for what was right even when it was dangerous. "So Mother was a fugitive?" Thomas asked, eyes wide. "Your mother was a woman defending herself from a bad man. There's a difference. She was brave and strong, and I loved her from almost the first moment I saw her." Vincent put his hand on his son's shoulder. "The point is, when you find someone worth fighting for, you fight. You don't back down, you don't give up. You do whatever it takes to protect them and build a life with them." Thomas nodded seriously, taking the lesson to heart. Years later, when he met his own wife, he'd remember those words and understand them fully. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Vincent took Olivia back to Eureka Springs, to the same church where they'd been married. Reverend Thomas had long since retired, replaced by a younger man, but the church itself was unchanged. They stood in the same spot where they'd spoken their vows 2 decades earlier, and Vincent took both of Olivia's hands in his. "I know we're already married," he said, "but I wanted to come back here and tell you again, in front of God and these walls that witnessed our beginning, that I love you, that I'll always love you, that marrying you was the best decision I ever made." Olivia's eyes were wet with tears, but she was smiling. "I love you too. More now than I did then, and I didn't think that was possible. You gave me everything, Vincent. Safety, love, family, home, everything I'd thought I'd lost forever." They renewed their vows there in the empty church, speaking the same words they'd spoken 20 years before, but with the weight of 2 decades of love and partnership behind them. Then they went to the same restaurant where they'd celebrated their wedding, now under new management but still serving stew and bread, and they toasted to the next 20 years. The children grew up and started lives of their own. Thomas took over more and more of the ranch operations, eventually building his own house on the property with his wife. Sarah married a banker from Little Rock and moved to the city, though she visited often. James went east to university, fulfilling his dream of seeing more of the world, but he always came home for Christmas and summer. Vincent and Olivia grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies slowing down but their love never diminishing. They handed over the daily operations of the ranch to Thomas, but remained active, advising and helping where they could. On warm days, they'd take long walks around the property, remembering all the years they'd spent there, all the work and joy and sorrow that had made up their life. "Do you ever regret it?" Olivia asked one day as they walked hand in hand through a field of wildflowers. "Taking me in, standing up to Thornton's men, all of it." Vincent stopped and turned to face her, cupping her weathered face in his hands. "Not for one single second. Every choice I made that led to you was the right choice. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Even if it had ended badly, if we'd had to run, or if there'd been a gunfight, even then. You were worth any risk, any sacrifice. You still are." Olivia kissed him then, soft and sweet, the kiss of two people who'd loved each other through decades of life and all its challenges. "I'm the lucky one," she said. "I found you when I had nothing, when I was terrified and alone, and you didn't just take me in, you gave me everything." They continued their walk, talking about their grandchildren, about plans for the next season, about all the small details that made up a shared life. When they returned to the house, their house that had started as a lonely bachelor's cabin and become a home filled with love and family, Vincent helped Olivia up the porch steps. "Remember when I found you sleeping under here?" he said, nodding toward the space beneath the porch. "How could I forget? I was convinced you were going to turn me in, or worse. I almost did, almost decided it was too much trouble, too much risk." Vincent pulled her close. "Thank God I didn't. Thank God I said the words that changed everything." "Come inside, it's warmer," Olivia quoted, smiling at the memory. "Best invitation I ever accepted." They went inside together, closing the door behind them on the cold autumn evening. Inside, the fire was burning warm and bright, filling the house with light and heat. They sat in their usual chairs, close enough to hold hands, and watched the flames dance. This was their life, Vincent thought. This warmth, this companionship, this deep and abiding love that had grown from the most unlikely of beginnings. He'd been alone for so long, content with solitude, and then Olivia had appeared and shown him what he'd been missing. She'd brought him joy and purpose, children and grandchildren, a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. "What are you thinking about?" Olivia asked, the same question she'd asked 1,000 times over the years. "How perfect this is," Vincent answered. "How grateful I am for every moment with you. Even the hard times, the winters when money was tight, the year the cattle got sick, especially those times. Because we faced them together and they made us stronger." He squeezed her hand gently. "I mean it, Olivia. Every single moment with you has been a gift." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and they sat like that as the fire burned low and the stars came out. Two people who'd found each other against all odds and built a life that surpassed any dream either of them had dared to have. Vincent had found a frightened woman sleeping armed under his porch, had invited her inside to warmth and safety, and in doing so had found the other half of his soul. It was, he thought, the best decision he'd ever made. And as he held Olivia close and felt the steady rhythm of her breathing, he knew that whatever time they had left together would be spent exactly like this. Loving each other, supporting each other, being grateful for the miracle of having found each other in a big, dangerous world. The fire crackled, shadows danced on the walls, and outside the wind whispered through the Arkansas hills. Inside, Vincent and Olivia Mercer sat together in the warmth and light, their hands intertwined, their hearts beating in sync, their love as strong and steady as it had been from that very first moment when he'd looked down and seen her eyes reflecting in the moonlight, and chosen to help rather than turn away. It was a choice that had defined both their lives, that had created a family and a legacy, that had proven beyond any doubt that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, from a stranger sleeping armed beneath your porch on a cold November night, waiting for someone brave enough to say, "Come inside. It's warmer." And it was warmer, warmer than either of them had ever known, the warmth of love and home and belonging, the warmth that would sustain them through all their years together until they were old and gray and still holding hands, still grateful, still deeply and perfectly in love. The years continued to pass with the gentle, inexorable rhythm of seasons changing. Vincent and Olivia watched their grandchildren grow, saw Thomas and his wife welcome 3 children of their own into the world. Sarah had twins, a boy and a girl who visited the ranch every summer and fell in love with the land just as their grandfather had. James eventually returned to Arkansas with a wife he'd met back east, settling in Eureka Springs, where he opened a bookstore that became the heart of the small community. On Vincent's 65th birthday, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. The house was full of laughter and noise, children running through rooms that had once been so quiet, the table laden with food prepared by 3 generations of women. Vincent stood on the porch watching it all, overwhelmed by the richness of what his life had become. Olivia found him there and slipped her hand into his. "Quite a change from the lonely rancher who lived here by himself," she said. "Best change I ever made. Look at all this, Olivia. Look at what we created. We did create something beautiful, didn't we?" She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her waist, holding her close. "Sometimes I still can't believe it's real, that I get to have all this when I came so close to losing everything. You didn't lose it. You fought for it, survived, and built something new." Vincent kissed the top of her head. "You're the strongest person I know. I learned from the best." Inside, someone called for them to come cut the cake, and they went in together, surrounded by love and family, and the life they'd built over 4 decades together. Vincent looked around the room at faces young and old, at the legacy he and Olivia had created, and felt a peace settle over him that he'd never known before he met her. That night, after everyone had gone to bed or returned to their own homes, Vincent and Olivia sat once more on their porch, looking out at the land they'd worked and loved for so many years. The moon was full and bright, casting silver light across the fields. "Do you remember what it was like that first night?" Vincent asked. "When I found you under this porch, every detail. I was so scared, so cold. I thought my life was over, that I'd either freeze to death or Thornton's men would find me. Then you appeared and you didn't shoot me or turn me away. You offered me warmth and safety, and you changed everything. We changed everything together." "Yes," Olivia agreed, "together." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that only comes from decades of knowing someone completely, of being so attuned to each other that words become unnecessary. Vincent thought about all the paths his life might have taken, all the choices he could have made differently. If he'd ignored the sound under his porch that night, if he'd turned Olivia away, if he'd backed down when Thornton's men came looking for her. But he hadn't. He'd chosen love and courage over fear and caution, and that choice had given him everything that mattered. A wife he adored, children who made him proud, grandchildren who carried on the legacy, a ranch that had prospered and grown, a life full of purpose and meaning and connection. "I love you," he said, the words as important now as they'd been 40 years ago. "I'll love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too," Olivia replied, squeezing his hand. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for taking me in when you had every reason not to. Thank you for being the man you are." "Thank you for letting me," Vincent said. "For trusting me when trust was the hardest thing in the world for you. For building this life with me." They stayed on the porch until the moon was high and the night had grown cold, then went inside to the warmth and comfort of the home they'd created together. As Vincent locked the door behind them and banked the fire for the night, he looked around at the house that had started as a simple cabin and become a home filled with decades of memories and love. Upstairs in their bedroom, the same room where Olivia had spent her first night in his house all those years ago, they prepared for bed with the easy familiarity of long marriage. Vincent watched his wife brush out her silver hair, saw the lines on her face that told the story of their years together, and thought she'd never been more beautiful. "What?" Olivia asked, catching him staring. "Just admiring my wife, your old wife. My beautiful wife." "Age has nothing to do with it." He moved behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "You're as lovely now as you were the day I married you. More so, because now I know every part of you and I love all of it." Olivia turned in his arms and kissed him, soft and sweet. "How did I get so lucky? I ask myself that same question every day." They climbed into bed together, Vincent pulling Olivia close, her head resting on his chest as it had countless nights before. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of autumn and coming winter. Inside, warm and safe and loved, they drifted toward sleep. "Vincent," Olivia murmured drowsily. "Yes. If you could go back and do it all again, would you change anything?" Vincent thought about this seriously, running through their life together in his mind. The struggles and triumphs, the joys and sorrows, the ordinary days and the extraordinary moments. "Not a single thing," he said finally. "Every moment led us here to this life we've built. I wouldn't risk changing even the hard parts because they made us who we are." "Me neither," Olivia said. "Even the fear and running, even the pain, it all led me to you, and that makes it worth it." They fell asleep like that, holding each other close. Two people who'd found love in the most unexpected of places and held on to it through everything life threw at them. Outside, the moon continued its arc across the sky, marking the passage of another day in a life well lived, a love well nurtured, a story that had started with fear and ended in joy. Vincent's last conscious thought before sleep claimed him was one of profound gratitude. For the woman in his arms, for the family they'd created, for the life they'd built from such unlikely beginnings. He'd been a lonely man once, content with solitude, convinced he didn't need anything more. Then Olivia had appeared, scared and armed and sleeping under his porch, and he'd said 4 simple words that changed everything. "Come inside. It's warmer." It was warmer. Warmer than he'd ever imagined life could be. Warm with love and family and purpose, with partnership and passion and deep, abiding affection. Warm with all the things that make life worth living, that transform existence from something to be endured into something to be celebrated. And as Vincent drifted into dreams, holding the woman he loved more than life itself, he knew with absolute certainty that he would make the same choice 1,000 times over. That finding Olivia and choosing to help her had been the best moment of his life, the beginning of everything that mattered. In the end, it was as simple and complicated as that. Love didn't care about circumstances or timing or risk. It simply was, demanding to be acknowledged and nurtured and protected. Vincent had recognized it that first night, had felt it growing stronger with each passing day, and had committed to it completely without reservation or regret. And Olivia, who had been so alone and afraid, who had lost everything and been running for her life, had found in Vincent a home and a haven, a partner and a protector, a man who saw her strength and loved her for it. She'd taken the biggest risk of her life by trusting him, and that trust had been rewarded beyond her wildest dreams. Together, they'd built something lasting and true, a love story that had started in fear and darkness and bloomed into light and warmth and endless joy. Their children and grandchildren would carry that legacy forward, would tell the story of how their family began, of the cowboy who found a woman sleeping armed under his porch and chose compassion over caution, love over fear. It was a story worth telling, a life worth living, a love worth fighting for. And as the night deepened and the stars wheeled overhead, Vincent and Olivia Mercer slept peacefully in each other's arms, two souls who'd found each other against all odds and held on tight, creating a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone. Proof that sometimes the most extraordinary things come from the simplest acts of kindness, from choosing to help when it would be easier to turn away, from saying yes when the world expects you to say no. The warmth that Vincent had offered that cold November night had grown into something neither of them could have imagined, a fire that burned bright and steady through all the seasons of their lives, lighting the way for everyone who came after them, showing that love, real love, was always worth the risk, always worth the fight, always worth choosing again and again and again until the very end.